Oh, hello there. Yes, it's going to rain. I think I'm going to get wet today. Anyway, leaving that aside, I thought I'd share with you the sheer brilliance that is the opinion pieces of the Daily Telegraph. I thought I'd give you a selection from the last few days over the weekend, etc. Collectively, this lot are really quite astounding in suffering from that particular malaise that opinion writers have, which is to have no memory of anything that they've ever done in the past. So, anyway, just bearing that in mind, let's dive in. First up is Nick Timothy, who's writing about short-termism in the economy. You may remember that Nick Timothy was the man behind Theresa May's astoundingly successful premiership. Yes, a guy that steered us so well through all those Brexit problems that we were having. Anyway, writing about the economy, and he highlights the problems with short-termism, and as he puts it, little of this is discussed or perhaps even widely understood in Westminster. Yes, good job we have Nick Timothy on hand, a man who widely understands Westminster. Not quite sure what else he does, however. I would have suggested that short-termism is built into late-period capitalism, but hey, that's just me on the economy. Oh yes, and next we have Miriam Gates, the woman who's directed by Invisible Sky People about to tell us all about trans people and abortion. And yes, apparently she's writing about spending by government, and she's suddenly realised that astoundingly, if you allow things to fall apart, they fall apart. As she says, sadly, a short-term approach to spending too often seems to stymie future productivity gains. Yes, glad she's woken up to this. She might want to look into the last 14 years of austerity. She might well be shocked, mightn't she? And then we have Simon Heffer, who's the working definition of why exactly does anybody employ him. He's talking about the Tories. Between now and the general election campaign, it must use its democratic freedom to deregulate, to forge trade deals, and above all, control immigration. Yes, so his solution to the woes the government has is that the government should carry on doing what it's been doing, because obviously it's working so well. And apparently these are democratic freedoms our government has. You may recall there was an election in 2019 when there was what we call a mandate. It is yet to be met in any way, shape or form. But I'm good luck with that, Simon, in terms of our government controlling immigration. Yes, seems to have forgotten a few things, doesn't he, Simon? Oh yes, and of course we have Priti Patel. Now, Priti Patel, you may remember her because she was the woman who traitorously tried to give British foreign aid to the Israeli army and got fired. Or you're probably thinking of the other Priti Patel, not that one, we need to forget about that, but the other Priti Patel who promised us 37.5 times that she was going to stop the small boats, and you can see how well that's gone. Anyway, apparently we mustn't agree to standardised tax rates around the world because that's socialism. So, what we need is the ability to have a lower tax rate than other people, because that'll be good for all of us, definitely. Because tax cuts for the rich are the important thing, aren't they? And she says, do we trust China to abide by the rules? Yes. Do we? Hard to say, really, from a woman that's quite happy to break international agreements, quite happy to basically machine gun people in the water. We don't really care about international rules. Not like China, eh? Yeah. Anyway, you can't really make that up, can you? Anyway, and then we have what the Telegraph thinks is satire from Andrew Deacon, and I read all of his stuff, and I just can't see anything that's satirical about it. I might well be missing something, but perhaps he's just so overwhelmingly subtle that I can't quite get it. But anyway, he's writing about Andrew Lloyd Webber, and this is the satire, right? Andrew Lloyd Webber is right. This new woke rule will be the death of art. Which is basically what the right-wingers are saying, that you can't, he's so bad you can't write anything now. Sorry, is that satire? What am I missing here? Somebody tell me. And finally, we have a number of really experienced people telling us all about Boris. There's Janet Daly, who, again, is another one of those heads. Has Janet Daly ever been right about anything? Who exactly thinks, well, if Janet's saying it, it must be true? Does such people exist? Anyway, she's writing about Boris, a man who she persuaded us we must vote for in 2019, not that horrible, nasty Jeremy. And she says, disastrously for him, and annoyingly for those of us who argued at great length against the notion he was a British Trump, leave that one hanging for a second or two, Boris has been making almost identical accusations against his prosecutors as the absurd and shamelessly malign former president. Yes, a woman that said we had to vote for him has now come up with the astounding notion that perhaps it wasn't such a good idea, just like the entire British press fleet for about the last 3 or 4 days. Bit of a shame they didn't do it a few years ago, isn't it, really? Still, never mind, they get paid a great deal for telling us how it is. Then there's Camilla Tominey, who, if I had to make up the name of somebody that was a Daily Telegraph opinion writer, it probably would be Camilla Tominey. Is that a real name? Anyway, she's bemoaning about the fact that poor old Boris is having it again. Let's quote from her: "Have these self-indulgent snowflake MPs completely lost their minds? The whole point of politicians is they criticise each other and scrutinise the decisions they make. It's called democracy. This sort of inward-looking nonsense is the last thing anyone is calling for on the doorstep, and if the Prime Minister had any sense, he'd put a stop to it." Yes, indeed. Imagine all those people that stood up in Parliament and said, oh, Boris Johnson's a liar, and got kicked out, and the fact that, they were horrible left-wingers, and how dare they make that outrageous suggestion against our glorious Prime Minister. How dare they, no doubt, Camilla would have said at the time. And yet here she is, saying, oh, now we need some democracy. Yes, we got it. People are being punished for transgressions. That's what part of democracy is, but apparently it's still problematic. And finally, the cherry on the top of the beautiful cake that is the Daily Telegraph's opinion piece. There's Charles Moore, ex-editor, all right, okay, who's bestie mates with his old mucker Boris. One can sympathise with the blob, a phrase Mr. Gove was the first to popularise. Boris Johnson was an extremely difficult Prime Minister for officials to handle. Yes, because he broke all the rules and lied all the time, didn't he, Charles? Having left office, he continues to get in the way of the smooth functioning of government. Oh, does he? Is that a plus, Charles? One must particularly sympathise with Rishi Sunak, for whom all of this Boris stuff is a waste of time, even a threat. Yes, because that's what people like you have wanted, haven't you, Charles, with your mates from your posh schools? You can't really make it up. Anyway, there you go. People with no collective memory about yesterday whatsoever, highly paid for these stunning insights. What do we take away from this? Well, what we need is tax cuts, and we need to just basically allow Boris to just tussle his hair and just be Boris. After all, who cares about the law, eh? Certainly not Priti Patel. Right, have a lovely day.